Welcome back. I'm excited you're here today because today we're talking about something that has literally changed my life, and that is boundaries. And to explain the concept of boundaries, as well as talk about how to develop healthy boundaries, I invited a dear friend of mine, Katherine Barr, who is not just a dear friend of mine, but also a licensed individual as well as couples counselor, and has been since 2005. So without further ado, let's talk about boundaries.
Hello, Catherine. It is so lovely to have you.
Hi, Claudia. Thank you. I'm so excited and happy to have this moment with you finally.
Thank you for being here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I will. My name is Katherine Barr. I'm a therapist for individuals and couples. I've been working as a therapist since 2005. And I also teach counseling, and I also give conferences and workshops on different subjects. So it's really my passion to talk about what it means to be human, the joys and the difficulties about being human, and to help people better understand and love themselves and to have better relationships. So that's my passion. That's I think, my life mission. And I want to say it's not because I'm a therapist that I've got everything together. I like to say I teach what I need to learn. So I'm always on the journey, learning to have a better relationship to myself and to others. So I find that really important to state that because I'm on the journey with everyone. Well,
That's
thank you for
beautiful.
having me here.
Thank you for being here. Now, Catherine, I know you're very passionate about boundaries as well, and you actually teach a workshop on boundaries.
Yeah.
So let's dive right into it.
Okay.
What are boundaries?
What are boundaries? That's a big question. It's not always easy, I find, to describe boundaries. You know, it's a concept we hear a lot about. It's a word we use a lot. But boundaries are basically what contain us, what protect us. It's a bit like we're a country and there's borders around a country that define a country, right? So as individuals, it's the same thing. We have important boundaries that help us define who we are and protect us and preserve us. So they're very, very important for our survival physically, but also emotionally, and I would say relationally. So boundaries are essential for our well-being. Does that
And
make sense?
it totally makes sense.
Yeah,
It makes sense to me now that
it
I have
makes
some
sense to
boundaries.
you. Yeah,
Didn't make sense to me a little while ago.
I
But
know.
tell
Yeah.
us what kind of different boundaries
Okay.
exist.
Okay. So there's many different boundaries, right? And the way I like to teach it is like to see it like it's different territories that we have. And so there's our physical boundaries. We'll talk more about what each and every one is exactly, but I'll just name them first. So there's the physical boundaries. In that, we would include material boundaries also. There's our sexual boundaries. There's our emotional boundaries. We have intellectual boundaries. We have spiritual boundaries. And I would say we have energetic boundaries also, our energy, which is also important. What we do with our time, our energy. So those different boundaries, territories are super essential. We need to be able to take care of it and to honor so that we can have a healthy relationship to ourselves and others. And it's not always easy. Like you said, we're not always aware. Like this whole notion of boundaries is quite new for me too. I didn't grow up learning about this. They didn't teach me this at school, unfortunately. So we kind of navigate through the world and our lives and our relationships, not really understanding this concept and not really understanding the impact that it has on us when we don't honor our boundaries.
So you would say that boundaries are something that need to be learned.
I think so. We learn a lot of it instinctively through our first relationships with our parents and our family. We get a lot of teachings around boundaries, right? In the family we grow up with. Some of it is healthy and some of it sometimes is unhealthy. But we also need to, and like anything I find in self-development and getting to know ourselves, there's concepts that we need to understand better with our minds so that we can really integrate them. And for me, like you said it, you didn't know about boundaries before. For me, it took me a long time to figure out that I had all these different boundaries, and that it was normal to have them, and that I had a responsibility to take care of them. So it's an important concept.
It is, definitely. So let's talk about the different kind of boundaries.
Yeah.
Let's start with emotional boundaries. To me,
Yeah.
that is an important one and was a
Yeah.
difficult one to learn.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of a healthy and an unhealthy emotional boundary, just to understand it a little bit better?
Yeah. So what I would say is, first, before getting into healthy, unhealthy, I would suggest we see what is inside our emotional boundaries, because what does it mean? So emotional boundaries, what constitutes them is our feelings, how we feel, our story, our wounds, our way of expressing emotion. All of that is part of our emotional territory. That's ours. We are sovereign of that. And so we're all entitled to our feelings and how we express our feelings. Some of us are more emotional and intense than others. I'm a very emotional person. Someone else is less emotional. That's their way of expressing emotion, and that's part of their emotional territory. So all of these aspects of our emotional territory are really important to honor in order to respect who we are. So you asked, what is having an unhealthy emotional boundary? For instance, I had very unhealthy emotional boundaries. So I'll give examples of myself. When I was in my 20s, especially, I was dabbling a bit in psychology, reading all these books, and I was enjoying it, and I was getting to know all kinds of concepts, but I had no concept of emotional boundaries. So I would invade other people's emotional boundaries by telling them how they were feeling and how they should feel and how they should express their emotions. And I would let others do that to me also, for instance, telling me, you're too intense, you're too emotional, So I would let people tell me how I should feel, and I would tell people how they should feel. So that's an example of unhealthy boundaries. Does that make sense to you? Does that resonate? Or yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. It doesn't resonate because I had a very different emotional boundary. For me, it was a wall.
Yeah.
I did not really let anything get to me to protect myself.
Yeah.
And I didn't really let anything out. So I also very unhealthy emotional boundary, but different than yours.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an example you're giving of when we have unhealthy boundaries, we can be either too open or too closed off.
Yeah.
So it becomes like a wall. We don't let anything in anymore.
Yeah,
so,
and that's what I had. Yeah, I had
That's it.
that wall, definitely. Yeah.
That wall, and it moves me when you talk about, because what I want everyone to understand is, it's not because we're bad people or we're flawed. It's because we're trying to defend ourselves. Like I had very, very porous boundaries because I wanted to connect and feel secure that I was lovable. So my concept was, if I want to be loved, I have to say yes to everyone. I have to let everyone in. I have to take in everything that people are saying about me. So, and maybe for you, it's more like a protective mechanism that I'm not going to let anyone in,
Yeah. For me, it was, I'm not lovable anyway, so I'm not going to feel that, and I'm not going to let anybody in.
And it moves me when you say that, because that's the wounds that sometimes we have. I had the same wound as you, but I defended myself differently by being this I like to say open bar. It's like an open bar. Anyone can come get a drink and not have to pay. So emotional boundaries that are unhealthy, we don't have this sense of being able to share emotionally what we want with whom we want to choose, or we overshare, or we are behind a wall. So, and that prevents us from having healthy relationships.
So what does a healthy emotional boundary look like?
Well, for me, it was a lot about learning to accept who I am emotionally, my intensity, my vulnerabilities, to give myself permission to feel how I'm feeling. I'm a hypersensitive person. So I expected everyone else to be hypersensitive like me. that's not true. And it's not that I'm better or worse. It's just a different way of being. I feel things very deeply. So I had to accept who I am and to honor that. And when people would say, "Oh, you're too sensitive," to be able to say, "Well, I am very sensitive. That's true. I'm not too sensitive." So to be able to accept our emotions, to not judge them. And so a healthy emotional boundary, for instance, is be able to express our emotions with whom we feel comfortable with. We don't have to share with everyone. We don't have to answer every question. And it's also being able to find places where we open up and share. Yeah.
Something that was very helpful for me when I learned emotional boundaries was this picture of a cheese dome. You know, you have the wooden board and then you have the glass on top.
Yeah.
And I pictured myself under that glass dome.
Yeah.
So rather than having that wall and nothing would come to me, I now had this glass dome. I was able to see everything. And it was up to me what I wanted to let in. So I could either just observe and go, nope, don't want to take any of that in. I could lift that dome a little bit and go, okay, I'm letting this in because this is true and I can take that in.
Yeah.
Or I can open it up all the way with somebody I trust and somebody I want to express myself with. So that to me was a really great, and I sometimes still use that image of myself under that glass dome because it made a lot of sense to me. So that was a good way for me to learn an emotional boundary.
I love that image. I think it's so visual and so clear because it's not about being behind a wall where no one can reach you. You don't open up to people because you don't trust, and then you can't receive the emotional connection with others. And it's not about being an open bar where there's no limits. So the cheese dome, I like it because you can see people, you can connect, you can choose, and you can open to people that with whom you feel comfortable. That's part of our responsibility, is to choose with whom we share, to choose with whom we open up. Because it's
also to choose what we let in.
And to choose what we let in. Exactly. Exactly.
Not take everything for face value. Somebody can say something about you and you can say, that's interesting, but I actually don't feel that way.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have to be nope or okay, you know me better than I know myself. So
yes,
that is,
exactly.
What about healthy boundaries in a relationship? I know my husband, we talk about the concept of boundaries. It is still something he struggles with a bit because he thinks boundaries are a wall. And that is not, of course, good to have in a relationship because you can't create intimacy. Let's talk a little bit more about healthy boundaries in an intimate relationship, in a marriage, in a relationship.
Definitely. I like to bring the image of, I actually drew it. I'm going to show you what I drew. It's not a beautiful drawing, guys. So sorry. So in order to have a relationship, you have to have a I, a you, and a we. So imagine those are three circles, three entities, I, you, and we. And this is what I would say is a healthy relationship. So there's me, there's you, and there's a place where we interconnect, and that's us, that's the we. So when we have unhealthy boundaries, either, like you said, there's no interconnection, it's like two people walled off, so there's no intimacy. And we need intimacy in order to feel fulfilled as human beings. It's what we seek, basically. We need intimacy. So you have two people that are separate. But if we have two fusional people who are not able to assert that they have a right to have boundaries, we have one on top of the other. And so there's no longer a we, because there's no longer two individuals. We're enmeshed on top of one another. So boundaries are important because if I don't respect them, it creates a lot of confusion and a lot of frustration in the relationship.
And resentment.
And I'll show you one example. When I finish, I'm a therapist, so I'm listening to people all day, and I love doing that. But when I'm done my work, And I walk out of my office, especially when I work at home. I don't have that time where I can walk home and, kind of be in my bubble. I literally walk out of my office. My fiance's there, and he works in a bubble all day. He does music, and he's alone all day doing music. He wants to talk with me. He spent his whole day alone, and he's like, blah, 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 blah. And I call it relational fatigue. I just need to be in my bubble, to tune out, maybe watch a Claudia Glow YouTube video, And at first I judged myself. A few years ago, I could see I was impatient when he was talking to me. I just wanted to cut the conversation. And I was thinking, oh, you're not a good girlfriend. You're not nice. You're not listening to him. You're not a good therapist because you're not listening to your fiance. And it took me a while to say, hey, I have a boundary here. I'm tired. I have listened to people all day. I need to find my bubble. But when I was judging myself, I wouldn't ask for that bubble. I would push him away. I would be impatient with my answers. He would feel rejected. He would react. And sometimes we'd get into fights.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to say, okay, what's happening? Where's my responsibility? I need a bubble. When I stop work, I need that moment, maybe half an hour where no one talks to me, where I'm alone. I can't expect him to guess that. I have a responsibility to tell him, to say, David, when I finish work, I really would love to be able to hear you and talk with you, but I have nothing more to give. I need to go in my bubble, and then we can talk. Yeah. And so I did that, and I told him what was going to happen, and it really helped our relationship.
It's much more fair to the other person as well.
It's fair, yes, because I was pushing him away, even energetically. He would walk into the room and I wouldn't look at him, hoping he would talk to me,
Yeah.
So this is a very simple example of when we don't have clear boundaries, it creates distortion. Yeah. So I don't know if you have an example of the importance of boundaries in your relationship.
Oh, definitely. I mean, what you're bringing up a good point. I am very much an introvert, and I'm very sensitive to noises and stimulation. Yeah. When I have a conversation, I can't listen to the radio at the same time. Now, my husband loves to blare the radio and talk to me and watch YouTube at the same time. Same thing. At first, I felt myself just go away, leave me alone. And all I had to say is, babe, please, I want to be able to really pay attention to you. So can we turn all the other things off? It can be that simple, but it can feel so scary. And I don't have the right to ask for this. And what is this person going to think? But I have learned that setting those boundaries is much more fair to the other person, fair to yourself. And you come together actually then being able to be with each other, rather than just trying to endure this person because you don't want to speak up.
I know. So I love the example you're bringing because it's simple things, right? It's simple. It's not it's little things of every day but what you said is giving ourselves permission to have that. And that's the difficult journey, I think, is giving myself permission. I'm allowed to have boundaries. It's always looking inside and saying, okay, what do I need to be happy with myself, to honor and respect myself, and to respect you? And, we want others to respect us. And I hear that a lot. They don't respect me. And I say it also. I mean, I can, but it's important for us to look, do I respect myself? Do I respect? And that's not always an easy question to answer, because sometimes for me it was like, oh, I want everyone to respect me. I find people talk down to me, but I don't say anything when it happens. I keep smiling and make a joke when deep down I'm hurt or I'm angry and I don't say it. So I'm not standing up for myself. I'm not respecting myself. And that's where I have responsibility to change things,
Let's talk about physical boundaries, which I find a little bit easier to understand than emotional boundaries. Yeah. Because we are this physical being, and it has a beginning and an end. So I find it a that one was a bit easier for me
Yeah.
to learn, though it still took some time. But let's talk about physical boundaries. Why are they so important?
I mean, they're essential, and we know when physical boundaries are abused or bypassed, and we can even say when there's physical abuse, violence, or sexual abuse, it damages the person's psyche. So it's a deep thing to be invaded physically.
Yeah.
And I don't say that lightly. And I know that, it's a sensitive issue, but I think it's important. Physical boundaries it's our integrity.
Yeah.
It's our physical, emotional, psychological integrity.
And as you're saying that, I was just saying, yeah, those were easier for me. I'm hearing myself talk and thinking they weren't that easy for me because I had what you talked about. I was physically abused and sexually molested. So that was definitely something. This wasn't mine. And I had to learn what that meant, first of all, that this is mine and that I have a right to speak up for it. And I remember the first time I consciously set a physical boundary, and it took quite a while. I was swimming at a public pool, and I swam at this pool every day, and I knew all the people there. And I had a lane to myself, and suddenly this man came in my lane, and right away I was very physically uncomfortable with this man in my lane. I didn't know him. He reminded me of somebody who hadn't been good to me in my childhood.
Yeah.
And I still remember myself standing there, going through all these different emotions. I was so mad. How dare this man go in my lane? What does he think? And I was hot. And I went through these 5 minutes of all these different emotions. And then suddenly I thought, wait a minute, I can just change lanes. So that to me, when that finally occurred to me, I have the right. I could first of all say to this man, please don't come in my lane, but it's a public pool, so he has the right to do so. But to go, wait a minute, I can actually physically take myself out of the situation and just go into another lane. It was mind-boggling to me that I have the right to do that. And ever since I did that for the first time, it was such an empowering feeling and such a wow that I have been practicing it ever since. If somebody comes too close in a grocery store, we all know this feeling, I think, when somebody comes too close and it feels uncomfortable, but we're not quite sure. Can we say something? Can we not? So I practice that, especially with strangers, where it's a bit easier. I say, I'm sorry, can you please back up? Or if this person doesn't back up, then I just move. So even though I said it was easy for me to learn physical boundaries, it really wasn't. I think it's an easier concept to understand than emotional boundaries. But it wasn't an easy one to learn. I take that back.
Yeah, I don't know if you can say I have tears in my eyes as I listen to you. I find you so beautiful and courageous to share your story of abuse, and I know there's other people listening that have that experience, and it saddens me that you went through that.
Thank you.
It shouldn't happen, but
it shouldn't happen. But I think it doesn't have to be as extreme as physical or sexual abuse. I think even people who've had a fairly happy childhood, we aren't necessarily taught, it's, give grandma a kiss and hug.
Well,
one aren't necessarily taught to say, no, I don't, this is my body. I don't want to do this right now. So
exactly.
You don't have to necessarily go through trauma to not realize that you don't actually have physical boundaries and to have to still learn that.
Exactly. And I really want to come back on what you said, because I want to honor the example you gave, which people who've had strong invasion in their bodies as children, they can develop a very distorted sense of their boundaries. Like when you said, this is not mine. So your whole journey is saying, this is mine. And the example in the pool I find is so beautiful, because it's the moment where you actualize. You're no longer the little girl who doesn't have a voice, who can't, who doesn't have the power, but now you're the woman who can say, hey, I'm going to change lanes. And that's an empowering moment, right?
Yeah. And when you just said, the realization that this is mine, I think that's what boundaries are about. The realization this is mine, whether they're emotional, physical, sexual. So let's talk about sexual boundaries, because I think they can be a bit tricky as well.
Well, we kind of touched upon it already because you talked about the abuse, but sexual boundaries is our sexuality. Who do we let in? Who do we share our sexuality with? Who do we open up? It can be the touch, it can be kissing, having intercourse, but it can be also seduction, just being seduced. I don't necessarily feel comfortable having seduction with just anyone, right? To understand that our sexuality, this is mine. This is mine, and my sexual identity. How do I want to experience my sexuality? What do I like or don't like? So that's important, and that is sometimes not always easy, again, because there's a lot of beliefs around sexuality. As men, as women, we're fed different beliefs about what our sexuality should look like and feel like and act like. I want to give an example. Maybe I have a client that when I give examples of clients, I just want you to know I distort it. Confidentiality is a boundary. I will never share and divulge information. So I kind of mess it around to give an example of a person I kind of create. Okay.
Yes.
I have this person who is a man, and he was having a hard time with his sexual boundaries because he had this concept that to be a real man, he had to be very assertive and go get the girl and be very, always have an erection and be always wanting to have sex. He had this belief, and he bought into that. He lost his sense of who he was as a sexual man. And in therapy, we were able to discover that that's not his style. He needs to connect emotionally before having sex. He needs that security, and that's who he is. He was buying into a wrong idea, and so he would not honor his sexual boundary because he was trying to be something he isn't. Yeah. So I don't know if that gives an example of sexual
it's a great example. Yeah. What about intellectual boundaries? That's
intellectual
one I struggle with sometimes.
Yeah. What makes you struggle? I want to ask you first, so then I can answer maybe better.
I think I don't quite understand the concept there.
Yeah.
Everything else I have had great opportunity to practice.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes I didn't like it. Yeah. But the intellectual, that's still one. Or maybe I have great intellectual boundaries. I don't know. So you tell us. What does an intellectual boundary look like?
The territory, what is it made of? It's all our beliefs, our thought process, what we've learned, what we think about the world, what we believe in, our values, our knowledge, our way of learning. We have different ways of learning. We have different ways of expressing our thought process. Some of us are very rational, very pragmatic. You're a very rational, pragmatic person, right?
Yeah.
I'm not. Okay. So you have this structure, and we can see it in your videos and the way you teach, and that's part of who you are. That's part of your intellectual boundary. Others are I'm more like, I have structure or else I wouldn't be able to teach, but I'm more of like a tree and the different branches in the tree. Like I go off on tangents and then I come back and then I go off and then I come back. That's my style. So
owning that.
Yeah. For me,
and
that was
not letting somebody change it. For example, if somebody says to me, "You're too practical or too rational," to say, "That's interesting. You feel that way. I have that little glass dome. That's interesting. You feel that way, but I don't think so."
Well, it's the two. The two is a judgment.
Yeah.
I am rational. Yeah.
Yeah. So not to take that on and then, I should change and all of that, but to say, that's really interesting. That was a big one for me. That is interesting. You feel that way, but I don't have to feel that way.
Yes.
That was a good one to learn for me, because it was I'm talking German now because I'm getting emotional. It was either I don't care what you think, that wall, or every once in a while that wall would completely disappear, and it was like, I so much care what you think, and I'm going to just do whatever you want to think of me a certain way. So to have that, it's interesting you think that way, and try it on.
Yeah.
Not just right away goes interesting, you think this way and I don't care, but it's interesting, you think this way. True, maybe true, not true.
Yeah.
And then I can decide, true, okay, let me do something about it. Maybe true, not true, okay, I don't have to worry about it. That one was a big one for me to really help me establish those boundaries. To really, when somebody said something like that, again, not just I don't care
Dismiss
or
it,
take it in, but to really give it a moment. Is this true? Maybe true or not true?
That's so beautiful. And I think the more I grow old, there's really good things about growing older.
Aside from all the bad things.
Aside from that's another video we can talk. But one thing I find is I have a deeper sense of who I am, and I'm more able to sit in my truth. And the more I'm able to do that and honor that boundary, the more I'm able to hear others and theirs, and it's less of a menace.
Yeah.
And I find that interesting. And I tried practicing this year. As you know, we're in 2021. It's politically and all, pandemic, and there's a lot happening. There's a lot of, I find it's very black and white, right now. And the exercise I did this a few times this year was interesting, is to go watch the news on a network that I would normally not listen to. I'm not going to name, but I would go to the opposite side and watch and listen. And it was such an empowering exercise to look at things from the other side, to put myself in the other person. Oh, okay. But I can only do that because I trust myself more now to be able to do like you're doing, saying, do I want to take this in? Oh, no, I'm going to leave it there. Whereas before I would take everything, or like you would be very rigid and push everything out. So healthy boundaries, intellectual healthy boundaries, we're actually able to debate, have healthy debate with people, talk to them, listen,
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know what you think, but I feel it's something lacking in our world right now.
It is. It's like you said, it's black or white. It's if you think this way, you're stupid, or if you think this way, you're too whatever, naive. Or it is. So that's a really good way of putting it. Having healthy intellectual boundaries allows you to debate and not get defensive.
Oh, sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, and to not get defensive, to not get judgmental, to not attack people, but have a back and forth and go, again, that's interesting. You think this way. I don't have to think
let me
that
just keep it in mind, taste it a little bit before I spit it out. Do I like it? Is there something in that can be useful, and it's an interesting exercise, especially when we have strong ideas. We can get walled off, and so intellectual boundaries are important, and they can change. That also I can give myself permission to change my mind.
That's a good point, that we don't have to be rigid about it.
No.
But for me, when I first learned the concept of boundaries, I was very rigid about it because I realized, oh my gosh, I didn't have this before, and this is so great to have. I'm not letting go of it. So it was difficult to be flexible about it. But I like that you bring that up, because I think that as you get more comfortable setting your boundaries, it's good to know that you don't have to have that rigidity around it, and that it can change. As we're talking about learning boundaries, how does one start learning to have boundaries?
Yep.
What would you say?
That's a good question. I would say the first thing is to introspect, to sit with ourselves first, and to look at our lives and try and see, where am I comfortable? Where am I not comfortable? Just that, the emotion of I'm comfortable, I'm not, will indicate sometimes that there's something. When I'm uncomfortable and uneasy or unsatisfied, it means something's missing, right? So just to introspect, to take the time. And what I like to do, or I could invite everyone to do, is to try and write down, physical boundaries, sexual, intellectual, emotional, and write down where am I at, what feels good, where am I taking care of myself, and where is it lacking. So there's an introspection to be made first. I can't take care of my boundaries with you if I don't know myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I end, where I start, where I finish, what I need, what is good, what is not good for me. I can't take care of that with you, right? So we have to take that time. And for some of us, that's not easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think what helped me, and this is why I thought that it was easiest to learn physical boundaries, even though in retrospect it wasn't. I think because with the physical boundary, we're all aware of somebody touching us in a weird way and we don't like it, or somebody coming too close and we don't like. I think even if we're not mentally aware of it, we can feel ourselves tighten up. Or for me, I would stop breathing. So to me, that is why I'm thinking it was an easier one to learn, because I was aware of that. This person is coming too close and I can feel myself getting really mad. Why is he coming so close? I'm stopping breathing. I had to really slow down, like you said, and go, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
Why am I not breathing? Why am I so tense? Is this person coming too close to me? Are they invading my space? Are they touching me in a way that I don't like? And then really listen to that rather than go, just ignore it, or just get mad at this person. So to me, that was easiest to learn with strangers, because with a loved one, that's a hard one, I think. But with a stranger, it is easier to say, okay, sorry, can you just back up? But yeah, that I think it's really difficult to learn to listen to those, not just emotions that come up, but to the physical sensations too that come up when our boundaries are being invaded.
Exactly.
And then to realize what that is.
Yeah, and what is it saying? This discomfort. But some of us, we don't even feel the discomfort. In my 20s, I didn't feel I was so dissociated that I didn't realize I was not comfortable until sometimes days or weeks later.
Yeah.
So for some of us, it's really taking and it can. How are you feeling now, Katherine? How do you feel with what this person just said to you? How do you feel with this situation? It's really becoming curious, listening in, and accepting that discomfort, physical, or sometimes, like you said, it's just a feeling sense. Honoring that. So I would say the first step, you asked me what's the first step, it's honoring our emotions, getting to know them, getting to understand our inner compass. How does it show up for me when I'm uncomfortable? Like, for instance, for me, sometimes I didn't know I was uncomfortable, but I would become really impatient, edgy. Yeah. So for me, when I become edgy and impatient, it's my red flag that says, oh, what are you not taking care of, Katherine? Because you're becoming,
or resentful. I find for me, if I'm resentful with somebody, I didn't take care of my emotional boundaries.
Yes.
How did they make me do this?
Rather than, I can't believe
I don't want to do this.
Yes. Like you said, no one can make me do something. What is it about me that's bypassing my boundaries? Why am I doing that? And to get to know that about ourselves so we can protect ourselves. So there's the first step I would say to everyone listening is to sit with yourselves a little bit and ask yourself, where is it? What is my style of, am I too open or too closed? Maybe with some people I'm too open and others I'm too closed, but in general, you have a general style when your boundaries are unhealthy. Like I said, for me, I was open bar. You were more like the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
So maybe just try and ask yourselves, where am I? Is it too open, too closed? And then maybe look at every boundary that we explored today, the physical, mental, intellectual, sexual. We have others we can get into in another video, but to just try and be really honest with yourselves. How am I doing with my physical boundaries? Where am I doing good? And where am I not doing good? And to just become aware of that first and foremost. So that would be the first step, I would say, to start with.
Yeah, that's a great first step.
And then next video, I think, because this is going to be a lot today, but maybe we can look into what do we do once we know where our boundary is. What do we do with that? Because it's not the last step. We can't expect people to guess, because I know where my boundary is. Everyone's going to guess. Nah. I need to learn to express it, and that we can talk about maybe next time.
Yes, this definitely needs a few more videos because it is a very, very important subject. But for me, learning the concept of boundaries and practicing them, and I'm by no means perfect, but I practice them as much as I can. It has been life-changing.
Yeah.
So it is a very important concept, and I would love to have more videos with you on this.
I would love. It's always such a joy to be with you, to share with you. I really honor how open and vulnerable you are, and for me, that is it's such a gift, to be able to share this, and I hope that it has value to the people who are listening. I would love to get feedback also, to hear other people how they're experiencing their boundaries and what's.
I would too.
Yeah.
Yes, so please let us know in the comments anything you want to comment on with your boundaries. Do you have them? Do you not have them?
Yeah.
What are your struggles with them? Do you have any questions for Katherine? And we'll have you back for another video.
I'd love that. Take care.
Thank you so much for being here.
Ciao. Ciao, Bella.